Hi, and welcome to Serenity Now, a place for entrepreneurs to ask questions, learn, get connected, and be inspired. Join us as we talk about all things business and the search for the ever-elusive Serenity Now in both business and personal life.
So Peggy, why should we listen to this episode today?
Well, I think we should listen to this episode because Nico provides us with a structure within which we can make our businesses better. I think he talks about the human element of any business structure, which may be overlooked by some other processes, but I'm big on structure. I'm big on the people element, so I love what he had to say.
Nico, why should we listen to this episode today?
Well, I think as a business owner or as an entrepreneur, sometimes our businesses run our lives and we're not running the businesses. This will help you get onto the path of getting what you want from your business.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Serenity Now. Another great episode that I feel that we've got set up for our listeners today. I just want to introduce my sisters that I've got with me today. Peggy, welcome. And Candace.
Hello.
Now that you hear our voices, want to make sure that's cemented back in. And then we've got an incredible guest that Peggy has brought to us today. His name is Nico Human. I struggle over the last name, Nico, and we were just laughing, like, how do you actually say it? But I want you to say it properly and then give our audience a chance to learn a little bit about you as I pass the baton over to yourself and you take the stage.
Perfect. Thank you, Rita. It's actually pronounced Nico Human. It's a South African last name, but you know, in Canada, you're a human. Everyone knows human, and so we just make the joke when we say we're the first humans in Canada. That's all we do all the time. Yeah. So as you hear from my accent, I grew up in South Africa, and when I was 40, actually, we immigrated to Canada in 1999, which feels like yesterday, but it's what 23, 24 years ago, and that was kind of when my entrepreneurial journey started, because in South Africa, I was part of the corporate world, but landing at YVR, I can still remember, with a wife and 2 kids and no job, but 146 job applications in it when we landed. And I had 3 interviews and didn't land any jobs. And I quickly realized that it's very difficult for an immigrant to start off a new career in a different country. I had a PhD in agriculture, which didn't mean anything. I had marketing experience and I was a marketing chief of a sizable company in South Africa. Didn't mean anything in Canada because people didn't understand. You know, this guy with a funny accent, he sounds funny. He's got a degree from a university no one's ever heard of. So I couldn't find a job. And so we were in a pinch, and that's when my entrepreneurial journey really started.
Tell us about how you got that first job, Nico, because that's an interesting story.
I was actually interviewing for a position with very polite Canadian farmers. And I know Canadians are very polite. And if they're from Langley or Abbotsford and those areas, they're super polite, beautiful people. And we were sitting in a boardroom and I was on the list of an interview. And as we went through the interview process, I realized that they haven't asked me anything about the job, of doing the job itself. And we were 45 minutes in on an hour-long interview. They asked me about South Africa and my kids and our journey and everything. So I realized, okay, I'm not getting this job, except if I do something crazy. You know, if you're desperate, you're an immigrant, you do stuff. You've got babies to feed at home. So all I basically said is I just stop the truck. I think I'm smelling a rat here. Something is going on. I think you've got someone else you've already interviewed. You've decided you're going to take that guy or that person. And I'm not the person, obviously, because you haven't asked me a single question about the job. You've just asked me about me. And we're nearly out of time. And, you know, that was this uncomfortable silence. And I said, okay, what I will do is I'll challenge you. I'll do this job for a month long. I've got all the background that I'll bring from South Africa. I'll bring my plan. I'll implement everything. And you only have to hire me for 1 month as a contract, a 1-month contract. And I'll do my best for it. If I'm a spectacular failure, you've got my plan, you've got everything, you can run with it. If I'm okay after the first month, give me another month and just hire me on a monthly basis. And, you know, it was very uncomfortable and I was sort of ushered out of the place. And I remember still Steve Thompson, who was then the executive director for the BC Agriculture Council. He was organizing the whole thing, took me out of the room and he shook my hand, very friendly, but sort of embarrassed a little bit. And it was dead quiet for 2 weeks. And I thought, okay, I'd blown this. They've given this to someone else. And then I got a phone call from Steve, and he said, they're checking my references, and can I help them check the references? I ended up landing a 6 months contract. So they hired me for 6 months. It became a year contract, and I worked for them for 7 years on contracts. And that's how my entrepreneurial journey really started. Our program eventually won a national prize. And my wife and I had to travel to Toronto to get this at the Winter Fair in Toronto. And it was just fabulous. And it was just this thing of when you're desperate and you have to adapt to things, you do what you can do. And this entrepreneurial journey started with that. And I had to find my company then. So it was founded in the year 2000, and I'm still working on it today. So that's how my entrepreneurial journey started, in an interview with farmers from Langley and Abbotsford.
That's an interesting start, Nico. So you told me when we were discussing prior to the podcast, you told me a story about actually it was one of the clients that I think you worked as a consultant, that you later then became a candidate and got the job was it CEO of the company?
That's correct, yes.
You helped them acquire or merge with other companies, and you had some interesting things that you did there. I'm really interested to hear what you think made a big impact there, why things were successful.
Yeah, this is a story of where I was working as a leadership consultant and a coach. And one of my coaching clients was going through a change in, shall we say, his family and his business. He had the opportunity to buy a company in the Okanagan, a trucking company. He himself had a few trucks on his farm in Abbotsford. And then he had bought a few other trucks also in the Okanagan. And so this other purchase was a sizable purchase. And he had to go through the coaching with me, and we worked together on seeing how can we make all of these three moving pieces work together. Because as part of this, he had to sell the family farm to buy the one trucking company. And so it was a big decision. We worked together over a period of time, and all the jigsaw pieces fell into place. And he ended up buying these three pieces. So he had all of them. And then he came to me and he said, we need to find someone to run this, to go there and merge the three entities. And can you help me find the person? So I said, obviously, and I'll help. And I started working. And as I developed the job description, I thought, oh, brother, this would be a fabulous opportunity for me. I love working with people. I love adventure. I love new things. I knew nothing about trucks, nothing about mechanics. I don't even like working on my own car. I pay other people to do the oily stuff on my car. But this is a challenge. So I went back to him and I said, yes, listen, I'll be willing to put this all together. Let's put this out there and see who's going to apply. But I'd like to put my name in the hat as well. And he said to me, really? You will leave what you're doing behind, your coaching and everything, to go do this? I said, yes, I just have to convince my wife, because she was a new grandmother at the time, and we were living in Vancouver, actually Abbotsford at the time, and we had to move to the Okanagan, and the grandbabies were here in Vancouver. I had to do quite a bit of work to convince her to go.
That was a sales job.
Yeah,
It was.
I don't know how you managed that.
It was dangerous, but a man who's possessed goes for it. Anyway, so there, and in the end, I convinced her, and she's fabulous. So she supported me in this. So we moved to the Okanagan, but it was a contract. And I said, for 4 years, I'll do this, and I'll merge the three entities, bring them all together, make them profitable, and then once that is there, coach in the CEO that will run it over the long term. Because I'm a builder. I love building new things, helping people, getting the most out of their businesses. But then I need to move on. I'm not the maintainer. Some people love maintaining. I'm not that person. Anyways, so we moved there. And when I got there, in the beginning, it was a nightmare because the climate, or shall we say, the culture was not what I expected. The people was very abrupt with each other. They used bad language, the truckers, when they, something about trucking, especially in the Okanagan. They have to drive over the Coquihalla in the wintertime with these massive trucks, 18-wheelers, with huge loads behind them. And it's ice and it's chains and it's crazy drivers like ourselves driving around them. So they were very stressed. And then when they arrive at a certain place, if something is not perfect, or it's not really going well, they lose their tempers very quickly. And when I arrived there, the F word featured in every sentence of a driver. I don't know if you know the particular F word I'm talking about.
Oh, we know it.
Anyways,
do share.
this F word was everywhere, sometimes 3 times in a sentence. But now, something as a South African, I had 3 years in the South African Army, and I could converse very freely with the F word as well. So I had that ability. I just chose not to use it. But then we knew as a leadership team, and I brought a leadership team in, that we had to build a culture where people feel safe and they can work together. And it starts with respect. So we made that our first core value. We see what is respect, and that became the core value. And then the drivers came to me and they said to me, okay, they want to bring their kids to drive with them during the summer break in the trucks, maybe for local halls where they don't go far. And I thought, oh, brother, okay, I've got you guys. And so I said, okay, we'll do that, but we'll bring in a zero profanity policy. That's what I called it, because I wanted the big guys. And they said to me, what is a zero profanity policy? I said, simple, no F words or their cousins, no F words or cousins, because you cannot be in the truck with your daughter of 9 years old or whatever, and you are now polite because your daughter is there, but then that your buddy comes over the radio and it's F this and F that and F the following. So I said, first we have to clean up our act. And then once it's clean, and I'm going to check with the clients where you deliver your loads, I'm going to speak with them and see with them if this has changed. And I'm going to check with the dispatchers who work with you on the radio all the time, whether we're cleaning up our act. And once the act is cleaned up, then we're going to welcome the kids on board. And, so I had the good family guys working with everyone. All the truckers worked together, all cleaned up their act. The mechanics started doing the same thing. And before long, the culture started changing because now they had a common goal. They wanted their kids on the trucks, and the wives started working together, and it was beautiful. Now, the spin-off for that was that eventually the client said they start loving our drivers above the other companies because we're the friendly family type people. We're respectful, and so the business did better because of this. And the wives loved us because now the husbands were less angry. And they learned these skills as well because, they're in their cab the whole day or many, many hours, and they will bring those habits home if we don't change that. So that's something that I really love doing there.
That sounds like it was a pivotal change for the company, that may have well influenced the success.
Yes, because we then we actually work on core values, and we said, okay, respect is the first one. And we said, let's have 3 core values. The second one was reliability and teamwork. And those 3, and I still remember them today, it's many years later, became the core values of the company, and that drove the company forward, made it successful.
Rita's going to love that because Rita's all about that.
I love being able to add some structure into business, even though typically entrepreneurs sometimes say, well, I'm not going to work under someone else very well, and I'm going to make my own kind of way. But we actually all really like structure. And once you build that structure, you can work within it, make some adjustments and make changes and have flow. But without that structure, you're kind of just meandering. And so I love the fact that you started with respect, especially in this type of industry. And it's fantastic that you got the buy-in, and you definitely said, hold on, it's not going to just happen like this. You got to show it first. And they had to show it because they wanted the kids on board. Right. So it was a beautiful way. And then once you got buy-in, once you got clients and other folks getting to follow same suit, but also like you guys better, including the better halves. Right. That's also really important. And then, of course, when you introduce something else, then you get good buy-in there as well, because the first worked so well. So congratulations on that.
And the big difference was in the way people interacted with each other, because don't come into a conversation angry, because that was kind of the way it was always. You come into the conversation with respect, and you're open to other people's opinions. So the dispatchers started working better with the drivers, and the mechanics and everyone, they all changed the culture. This is what we want. And it's that structure of the culture, and then putting the business operating system on top of it, that changed the company, because that then leads to the results.
Right. Nico, that's a great story. And it speaks to a lot of the podcasts we've talked about. We've talked about structure. We've talked about values, knowing who you are as a company and what your values are. And that's a great success story of that value system being put in play. You had another story that you talked about the Rockefeller habits, and I'm unaware of what they are. I'd love to hear about that.
Yes, this is actually a story a few years later. One of my clients that I was coaching at the time, I'm a McKay CEO Forum chair as well. So he was a member of one of my forum chairs. And he came to me and he asked me to install an operating system for his business. At the time, I'd done for the trucking company, I did something similar to the Rockefeller habits. It was called the 4 Disciplines of Execution, which is another operating system that I installed for the trucking company. So when he came to me, I said, okay, I suggest we don't go for Rockefeller habits because that's really involved. And that's for a very big company normally. It's very complicated and we don't really need a Rolls Royce if you can get away with maybe a Jaguar. And so I said, okay, let's go for a Jaguar. And he said to me, sure, that sounds good. And it worked very well for the trucking company. But then he said to me, won't you just read a book before you do that? Because I read this book. It's called Traction, the book's name, and it's Traction by Gino Wickman. Read this book. And if you still want to do the Rockefeller habits or the 4 disciplines of execution, we'll go for it because I want to hire you. But if you've read this book, Traction, and you've heard of the entrepreneur operating system, then maybe we'll go for that. So I read the book and I fell in love because the difference between EOS and the other systems was the human element. And maybe that's because I'm a human. Never mind. It's the people component. Some of the other systems put all these business structures and things first, and then people or HR is kind of like an add-on. Okay, now we put all these things in place. Now let's see how people are going to work in it. Whereas EOS starts with the people in the middle. And we put the business in the middle, and then we say, now we have to find the right people to run the company, and we go from there. So it's part of the core values. It's called the people component. And I just love that. Also, the fact that the EOS system is very simple. It puts things in one of 6 buckets, and you work on those 6 buckets. The buckets are, we have a common vision. We all go into the same direction. And we as a leadership team know what it is, and we tell the rest of the company this is where we're going. Then we have the right people in the right seats. So a great people component. Then we've got our data, very simplified, so that we run the company on data, real data, not on opinions, not on emotions, not on politics. We run it on data, so we have a scorecard. Then we've got issues, because issues are things where people, because when you've got strong people, they know where they're going, and they've got strong data, the company becomes transparent. And so now people start talking about their issues. Now we need to know, how can we celebrate issues? How can we see them as opportunities? And how can we work together when there's discord or we disagree? Because that's where the opportunity lies, and that takes us forward. So we need to manage our issues. Then our processes, how do we describe our processes? And lastly, traction, how we execute the vision day in and day out throughout the company. So those 6 components are the components of the EOS system. So I read it, and I went back to him. His name is Jared Falk. He's also from Abbotsford. The company is now called Mazora Media. They're enormous now. When we started, it was called Drumeo. They teach people internationally to play drums and the piano and different musical instruments in cyberspace from Abbotsford. Okay, just put that in your pipe and smoke it.
I think that's Ken Falk's son, isn't it?
That is.
We just had Ken on the podcast.
Yeah,
okay,
that's one of Ken Falk's. And so that's Jared. Okay, and so Jared gave me the book to read. So once I read the book, I said, oh, brother, this guy knows more than I do with all my so-called wisdom of running companies. So I read the book and I went back to Jared. I said, I want to do this, but I need to get training first because I don't want to do this not properly for your company. So he gave me 3 months so I could go get training, and they were my first EOS client. And I just loved it to put them on that growth journey because they've seen that this structure in their business allows the business to grow very fast, but it's a controlled growth. Because you need to have all of these things in place. You need to have the right people that can drive the growth, and you constantly need to update the system as you go forward. So they started with it. They're still on EOS today. It's many years later. I've worked myself out of a job with them because they graduate and they start running it themselves. But they've nearly quadrupled, and they're still running on EOS. So that's where it started. And so I'm very excited about the EOS journey because we talk about the EOS journey. And one of the reasons we emigrated to Canada was to get a better quality of life for ourselves and our kids. And I actually lost it in my journey as an entrepreneur at one stage because I got so focused on providing for the family, feeding the babies, and that type of stuff. And I just drove the business all the time that I didn't have a quality of life. It just went out the door. But what the EOS system tells us is that we need to get from our business what we want from our business. The business is not the boss. We are the boss. We need to decide what the business looks like and how we run it. And where's our free time? Where's our family time? How do we take care of ourselves and our staff? And we call that the EOS life. And so that is what I started teaching. And I'm now in what I call my passion career. I don't run companies anymore. I just help companies be better. So I implement things like the EOS system for them. And I live the dream myself. I just take enough clients that I have a good quality of life. I have a good balance. I'm really in the life of my wife, my kids, and grandkids. I can be part of everything that I enjoy. I can have passions. I sing in our big choir at church, stuff like that. Now, because I've got this balance. And you know what happens? When you've got this and you start saying no to certain things, you know what you want and what you don't want, your value actually goes up. My clients will actually pay more for my time now than when I was running off my feet trying to please everyone and just trying to bring stuff in. Because now I can sit back and say, really, this is what's going to help you more than if we just do what comes naturally. There's more thinking time, because leadership is all about removing yourself sometimes and starting to think deeply of what are the important things that we need to do and not just doing what we think is just in front of you.
Getting off the treadmill.
Yeah,
right?
getting
off the treadmill.
Getting onto the mountaintop. Yeah.
Autopilot, right? That we sometimes get on.
Yeah, I think every entrepreneur gets in that mode of just running to keep up with themselves, that they forget that, a step back and looking at the business, could probably release some of that effort of just trying to keep up, right? Thinking it through.
What I love about the system, that if you work in a system, if you're organized and you're disciplined, it's not rocket science, but you need to have a system that actually lifts you out of the business from time to time. And in EOS, we've got quarterlies. Every quarter we lift them out, and they have to look at the previous quarter, how the quarter went, what they learned, and plan out the coming quarter and say, what are the most important things we need to focus on this coming quarter that will set us apart, that will make us successful? Because this lifting yourself out to work on the business and not be stuck in the business all the time. Now, you have to work in the business during the quarter. You've got to keep the lights on. You've got to bring the results. But that lifting yourself out from time to time is cardinal. And something else that we teach the leaders there is, we call it a clarity break. And it's something that you have to do as a leader at least once a month, maybe once a week. And that is to remove you physically from your working environment and maybe go sit on a mountaintop or in a tree or whatever works for you. Some people just put earphones on and go sit in a coffee shop. But you've got to be in a different environment, away from work and away from the distractions of work and the disturbances. And then take a pad and a pen and just thinking about the business, thinking of how can I make my business and my life better? How can I be more strategic? What are the areas in my business that are complicated that I need to simplify? What are the things that I don't look at forward, that my structure isn't serving me? I need to get a better structure, better people, and better places. What are the things that I need to predict better? Where are we going? The future that we're going. What are some of our processes that are not working? How do we need to make those things better? And what are the things on my plate that I need to get off my plate, that I need to delegate? Because if we go out and we go and sit in a place like this and think about the business and our role in the business, it actually allows our brain to be creative, and we create a better tomorrow for ourselves. Otherwise, we're just running the treadmill all the time.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful for any business person to work on the business. And I like your idea of removing yourself from the environment, because it's hard not to be caught up in what's going on in an office if you're in an office environment. So that's really great, Nico. I think we're probably at the point in our podcast where we maybe need to do a quick fire. So we like to go around and ask everyone if you have something from this discussion that has resonated with you, or a little bit to add to it. So I'm going to start with Candace. You've been quite quiet up there, Candace.
I've been busy listening. And I have to say that this Entrepreneur's Operating System, EOS, this is probably the third or fourth time this has come into my world in the last 3 or 4 months. So I think the universe is trying to tell me that this is the next thing that I need to visit and make myself familiar with. So I think that's my point today. So.
Yeah, and if you want that, what I do is, if you want to know more about it, I spend 90 minutes with you online or in person, and I walk you through the whole system. It takes 90 minutes because you can't do it in 5 minutes. It's too comprehensive. You've got to see the whole thing. And it doesn't cost anything, so it's open to anyone who's interested to know more. 90
That's
minutes,
good.
and I'll walk you through the whole thing.
Well, we'll definitely have your information posted as well with this podcast, Nico. What about you, Rita?
Well, I'm sitting here reflecting and enjoying, listening to your voice, which I actually quite like, what I'm going to call an accent. Maybe to you it's not, but to me it's really quite lovely. I could probably listen to you forever, Nico.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Rita.
But I also love how you brought the structure in. And, I think that's just a key thing for me is, understanding a lot of the times the why and then the end goals, but then you also have to bring in the structure. And there's a million ways to do it. This isn't the one and be all end all way, but it seems to be a way that makes sense for you and for some of the companies that you've worked with. And so as long as people are looking at some ideas on structure, it doesn't matter whether you're starting or whether you're growing, you go through these growing pains and changes just like in life, like we do. And so we need different tools to use as we grow. So thanks for bringing this forward, and love the fact that you can offer that 90 minutes and it's free. And so we love being able to provide resources to our fellow entrepreneurial community. So thank you.
Yeah, and just to mention about this structure, there are different structures. EOS is just the one that works really well for a certain size of business. The Rockefeller Habits is very, very good if you're a Fortune 500 company, for example. And that's not the playfield that I'm playing in at this time. I love the entrepreneurship of companies from 10 to 250 people, not too much bigger than that. It's that sizable. And, and that's, but the point is that you make is the structure is simple and the discipline is simple. And whatever structure you choose, stick with it and don't overthink it. Don't bring different things in all the time. Once you've decided on one, stick with it, because there are constantly new books, new ideas, whatever. And you can get sidetracked and it becomes like a shiny object here and a shiny object there. My only message is choose one and stick with it, because that brings some simplicity. Otherwise, it overcomplicates things. And to run a business is complicated already. We want to simplify, simplify, simplify.
All right. My takeaway from this is basically the same things that Rita has said, that structure is so important, and getting yourself out of the business and looking at the business. And I love the idea of getting physically out of the office and reviewing it is a great idea, Nico. And we thank you very much for all of the great commentary today on that type of behavior within a business that involves looking at the people first. I like that very much. I think that is an element that we all have to deal with all the time. We are people. We deal with people, and the common complaint amongst business people is dealing with people. So thank you again for that. Rita, I'm going to let you wrap it today.
So I just want to say thank you again, Nico, for coming in and joining us and sharing some beautiful thoughts and perhaps some tips and strategies that maybe you haven't thought about or considered before. And we hope that this episode has brought you some serenity now. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Peggy.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and picked up some good tips and best practices that would benefit your entrepreneurial journey. Remember, none of the content in this podcast should be relied upon as standard legal or business advice. Always consult a professional for your specific business. You may know someone who could benefit from this podcast. Please share it with your business community, and perhaps it can give an entrepreneur you know some serenity now.